the do's and don'ts. Now that we've talked about how an organization can benefit from the diversity of its employees, let's discuss how you can become more sensitive and promote cultural diversity. The following are the main points or objectives for the second part of this training. Identify and explain at least 6 things an organization should do and not do to promote and support cultural diversity. List and describe 5 things you can practice, the do's, to promote cultural diversity. List and describe 5 things you should avoid, the don'ts, as you become sensitive to cultural differences. Review 1 or 2 cultural diversity websites. Examine a situation and evaluate what an organization or individual is doing or needs to do differently to support and enhance cultural diversity. Evaluate your current organization and explain one thing you think your organization could do differently to support cultural diversity. An organization's role to promote and support cultural diversity is different than an individual's role. So let's first talk about what an organization should avoid, or the don'ts, and what an organization should implement, or the do's. On our left we have our don't column, and on our right we have our do column. So let's begin. Do not treat cultural diversity as a checklist training item. Cultural diversity is great to introduce as a cross-cultural training initially. However, do treat it as a long-range vision. It has to be an ongoing topic. Don't get angry. Avoid losing your cool and allowing conflicts to tap into extreme emotions. Do try asking descriptive questions to filter through cultural differences that are more than often frustrating. Don't require positive actions from only staff. Ensure leadership embraces cultural differences as well. Do make diversity a priority throughout all levels of your organization. Don't avoid cultural barriers. Cultural barriers are shared experiences and result from external factors. For example, differences in language, values, assumptions, or expected behaviors. The entire purpose of cultural diversity is to embrace these differences and build new shared understandings, experiences, or appropriate levels of behavior. Do avoid culture shock. Culture shock is internal and is a reaction to unfamiliar stimuli. Culture shock is a personal experience and can be triggered by cultural barrier. Thus, embracing and understanding cultural barriers reduces the chances of cultural shock. Do consider establishing an advisory committee or diversity council. It should comprise of an equal representation of all levels of employees and cultures within an organization. Such a group can keep the organization well advised and updated on current diversity issues and concerns. Do manage cultural diversity through ongoing awareness. Ensuring every staff member is aware of the current cultural makeup and the identification of any differences is very important. Finally, each company needs to model diversity. Do make it visible at all levels. Practice what you preach. Though we can add to the list of what an organization should avoid and implement, the list of what an individual should avoid and practice is much longer. Your role within your organization and in your everyday life is different. There's a lot more an individual can do and don't do to support cultural diversity. We will briefly list some do's and don'ts taken from various resources. These are recommendations, and you can always come up with more unique or customized approaches. We have the column of what an individual should avoid or don't do, and then we have the column of what an individual should implement or do. It's easier to manage what one should avoid, the don'ts first. Do not rely on humor. You have to remember humor does not translate in the same manner across languages or cultural barriers. Do not get angry. We discussed how managers of an organization should avoid this. Well, so should individuals. Avoiding frustrating situations that lead to extreme emotions can easily be handled by asking the right question. Why are you angry? What led to that anger? And so on. Do not make promises. We know this to be true with children. We've all done it before. I promise to buy you that toy or take you to Disney World. Well, the same is true with many different cultures. Many rely and hang on evidently empty promises. For example, next time I'm in New York, I'll look you up. Believe it or not, in many cultures, it doesn't matter that your next trip to New York was just a layover. You should have called from the airport. Do not use idioms. Many would think this is something that everyone would try to avoid. Idioms are expressions that are understood only by a native speaker of that language. In English, we say terms like bend over backwards, take the bull by the horns, and out of the woods. As we see the growth of various age levels within our workforce, idioms are even getting hard to track even for the native English speaker. Thus, try to become more literal. For example, the following phrases could be translated. Try very hard instead of bend over backwards. Act decisively to correct the situation instead of using the phrase take the bull by the horns. Do not shout. If someone is having difficulty comprehending what you are saying, shouting does not help them decipher your statements. Someone from a different culture may feel like you are upset. Such is the case when you are trying to get the attention from someone of a younger generation. Shouting does not help them pay attention. Do not avoid written words. Whether someone has a language barrier or is of a younger or older age, many individuals have a different way to comprehend material and may be visual learners. Others may have an unknowing physical hearing impairment. Thus, rather than getting angry, shouting, using off-the-wall idioms, just write down or present some verbal cues. Shockingly, those from another language culture in many cases have a wider reading vocabulary than listening vocabulary. As far as the do's, we have more things an individual can do than what we realize. The following are very important things you can practice or implement, even do, but remember these are not the only things you can practice. Tabor, take a breath and reflect. This is self-explanatory. Do not rush. Think it through. Do give respect. Genuine respect to everyone you work with. Do say sorry if you are genuine to begin with. When you do make an error and are quick to apologize, it does mean a lot. Do be patient with yourself and others, as there are many opportunities to make mistakes. Move past these occurrences as quickly as possible. Do allow for self-reflection. Whether you write your thoughts for the day on a paper or just take 5 minutes at the end of each week to reflect on the day's or week's learnings, think about what has occurred in a positive manner without lingering on the negatives. This brings us to do listen carefully. Just don't listen to other viewpoints out of generosity. Listen to learn and better your work and yourself by doing so. Do remember environment is everything. Be sensitive to your surroundings and the unofficial hierarchy. Arrange chairs, tables, desks, etc. to prevent any one person or a group of people from being in a power position. Use various techniques at different times, such as a giant circle, sitting on the floor, standing, to make everyone feel a sense of comfort and equality. Please, if anything, do remember cultural diversity is not limited by a country. During the first part of this training, we define cultural diversity as differences in language, dress, and traditions. However, cultural diversity is more than that. Remember, we stated that it's differences in moral judgments, social organizations, and interactions with the environment. Both the organizational and individual do and don't list provided will give you some ideas to support and implement cultural diversity in your organization and everyday life. There are numerous nonprofit organizations and free resources available that support multiculturalism. In our next section, we'll review some of these resources. 8. This completes part 2 of our training. Let's review what we've covered thus far. As an organization, there are many things that can be avoided, including treating cultural diversity as a checklist training item or getting angry. An organization should avoid requiring actions only from staff. Leadership needs to comply as well. And don't avoid cultural barriers. These are differences that make an individual in the organization unique. An organization should implement a long-term vision and promote asking good descriptive questions rather than getting angry. An organization should make diversity a priority at all levels and avoid culture shock. Remember, culture shock is a personal reaction to an unfamiliar stimuli. An organization should organize an advisory committee or diversity council, continuously increase awareness, and not only model cultural diversity in its leadership, but by increasing visibility. An individual has a greater impact on supporting cultural diversity. The following are some do's and don'ts we discussed. Finally, everyone should keep abreast of resources that can be easily found on the World Wide Web, from nonprofit organizations to tools and research, quizzes,